Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Juan and welcome back to another book review. So today we're going to talk about the great novel WIDE SARGASSO SEA by the Dominican writer Jean Rhys. Last week I reviewed one of my favorite novels, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and I said I would review WIDE SARGASSO SEA this week. But before I begin, I would like to make a little correction. WIDE SARGASSO SEA is not a sequel to Jane Eyre, as I stated wrongly in last week's video, but a prequel. The narrative events in WIDE SARGASSO SEA are meant to take place before the ones on Jane Eyre. If you appreciate my reviews and would like to show your support, please give this review a like and subscribe to my channel. That way this video will get to more people who might also enjoy it. Thanks. You might want to check out my review of Jane Eyre before watching the rest of today's video, and I think you should read Jane Eyre before reading WIDE SARGASSO SEA, because even though Rhys's novel is a prequel, I think there's an assumption that readers should be familiar with Jane Eyre before reading this novel. Okay, so let's talk about WIDE SARGASSO SEA, which was first published in 1966. By then, Jean Rhys had been living in Europe for decades, but the author was actually born in the Caribbean island nation of Dominica, which at the time of her birth and during her childhood as well was still a British colony. Jean Rhys read Jane Eyre as a young girl, and she tried to imagine what the life of the character of Martha Mason could have been like. In Jane Eyre, Bertha Mason is Mr. Rochester's first wife, whom he had met in Jamaica and then locked up in the cellar due to her mental health issues. Probably none of that would have seemed problematic to a reader in the 19th century, and even now, if we read Jane Eyre and don't stop to think about that particular aspect of it, we might still get carried away by the main story and not realize how problematic that aspect of it is. And that is just because there is extremely little about Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre. She's not so much a character as a plot device. Luckily, Jean Rhys thought a lot about Bertha, this Creole woman who had been uprooted from her native Jamaica and was forced to live in a cellar in the north of England. No wonder she tried to burn that damn house down twice. In my review of Jane Eyre, I said that Charlotte Bronte doesn't write about race equality. That's not something that she seems interested in, but WIDE SARGASSO SEA is attuned to race relations in the Caribbean, specifically in the islands colonized by the British. Rhys writes about the immediate post-slavery period in the West Indies. So the Emancipation Act had freed all slaves in the British Empire in the 1830s, and WIDE SARGASSO SEA is approximately set in the immediate 10-year period right after that. So WIDE SARGASSO SEA and also Jane Eyre are both set in the aftermath of the Emancipation Act, but you might not realize that just from reading Jane Eyre. At least in part, WIDE SARGASSO SEA is an exploration of the relationship between former slave owners and former slaves. There's a lot of hostility between the white and black populations depicted in the novel's part 1. Okay, let's talk about the main character in WIDE SARGASSO SEA. Her name is Antoinette, and she's a Creole girl whose parents had been slave owners. Now, Creole in this context means a person of European descent born in the colonies, okay? So Antoinette is based on the character of Bertha Mason, created by Charlotte Bronte as Mr. Rochester's first wife in Jane Eyre. But, as I said in my review of Jane Eyre, Bertha Mason is not so much a character, but a plot device in Jane Eyre. There is a clear attempt at giving Bertha a voice in WIDE SARGASSO SEA and also reclaim her real identity. Of course, rather than reclaiming her identity, what Jean Rhys does is give the character an identity. For example, she calls her Antoinette, and we learn that Bertha is a name that Mr. Rochester had given her. In this novel, Antoinette has a family. She belongs to the decaying white aristocracy, but despite being white, she is foreign to Mr. Rochester. WIDE SARGASSO SEA is great at exploring the subtleties of racial identity and its complexities. Differences in skin color only tell us part of the story. Antoinette, okay, she's white in Jamaica, but not really as white as European-born people like her husband, Mr. Rochester. Antoinette was born and raised in Jamaica in a time of deep social change after the black slaves had been legally freed. One of the most fascinating aspects of this novel is how Jean Rhys imagines her character's childhood and youth to be. But Wide Sargasso Sea is not always straightforward because of its modernist structure. Jean Rhys did not choose to imitate a realist 19th century style like other contemporary writers who write about the Victorian era sometimes do. Something that infuses this novel with complexity is that there are different points of view, and Antoinette's point of view as an adult can be a bit muddled because of her mental state. Wide Sargasso Sea is a critique of English colonialism, so I would recommend it to readers interested in post-colonial literature, but it is also worth reading if you like romantic, exotic narratives with a touch of the supernatural. And if you love Jane Eyre, reading Wide Sargasso Sea should give you a fresh perspective on things Bronte's novel doesn't seem so interested in. If you want to read both novels, I think I'd recommend reading Jane Eyre first and then Wide Sargasso Sea, because I think Wide Sargasso Sea would make more sense like that, even though it is supposed to be a prequel to Jane Eyre. But you could always read one of the two novels and not the other as well. I just hope my two reviews, my review of Jane Eyre and this review, have helped you decide whether you want to read either one of these two books or both. And I think that this is all I can say about Wide Sargasso Sea without spoiling it for people who have not read it yet. So now I'm going to summarize the plot and talk about the novel in more detail, and there will be some spoilers. So you have been warned. If you don't want to hear any spoilers about Wide Sargasso Sea, you should stop watching right about now, and I will see you again, I hope, for another video. Okay, for those of you who are still here, I am now going to summarize the plot and share more of my thoughts on Wide Sargasso Sea. When the novel begins, Antoinette is still a young girl living in Jamaica. Antoinette is white and her parents are former slave owners. Antoinette belongs to the local white aristocracy who went into decay after the Emancipation Act of 1833 came into full effect and black slaves had been freed. Antoinette lives with her mother Annette, who is a widow, and her younger brother Pierre in a state that had seen better days. They have some black servants who gossip a lot about the family and about how they are ostracized by the local upper class. Antoinette is very withdrawn as a child. Her only friend is one of the servants' daughters, Tia, but even Tia will reject her eventually. Antoinette's mother, Annette, marries an Englishman named Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason has the estate restored to its former glory and hires new servants. However, one night, former slaves stage a protest outside the house. Accidentally, they set the house on fire with their torches. Now, if you have read Jane Eyre, you will understand the significance of this house fire. The family manages to flee the house. However, both Pierre and Antoinette are hurt. Pierre directly because of the fire, and Antoinette because Tia throws a rock at her. Antoinette falls seriously ill, but when she recovers, she finds out that her brother Pierre has died. Annette's mental health suffers from all of this, and she's left in the care of a couple. Antoinette then goes to a convent school for several years, but she's now pretty much on her own. Mr. Mason spends most of his time in England, and he only visits the island occasionally. One of his visits takes place when Antoinette is 17. Mr. Mason wants to marry her off to one of his friends from England. Then part 2 is narrated by Antoinette's English husband. He is Mr. Rochester, but his name is never actually mentioned in Wide Sargasso Sea. We find out that he starts having second thoughts on their marriage even during their honeymoon. After all, he had only married her for money because Mr. Mason's son had offered him a good amount in exchange for marrying Antoinette. He finds his new wife increasingly strange, and he gets very hostile toward her and her surrogate mother, Christophine. To make matters worse, one day he receives a letter from Daniel Cosway, who is one of the illegitimate children of Antoinette's father. In his letter, David says that Antoinette is depraved and mad, and after reading the letter, Mr. Rochester begins to think that Antoinette is in fact insane and grows to hate her. So Antoinette asks Christophine to make a love potion for her husband. That night, the couple argues, and the following day, Mr. Rochester has sex with one of the servants while Antoinette hears everything from the next room. Antoinette goes to see Christophine, and when she comes back, she's drunk. The couple has another fight, and Antoine begs her husband to stop calling her Bertha, something that he has started to do recently for apparently no reason. Part 3 takes place in England and is narrated by Antoinette. We'll learn that she is now locked away in her husband's house. She doesn't even know where in the world she is, and she doesn't believe it when people tell her that she's now in England. So Antoinette has grown to be very violent, but after every violent episode, she seems to lose her memory of it. And she also keeps having this dream about setting the house on fire. Then, one night, she wakes up for one of those dreams and decides to act on it. And the novel ends as Antoinette walks downstairs while holding a lit candle. I found all the stuff about race and the complexities of racial identity fascinating. The fact that Antoinette will never be as white as European-born whites just because she was born outside of Europe, and the way that is explored in the novel is fascinating. But racial identity is not the only aspect of Antoinette that plays against her in the novel. The other one is gender, of course. Even though she's white, she practically becomes a slave because she's a woman. But she doesn't become a slave in the sense that she's forced to work. She's not. But in the sense of being given to a white man who considers her less than and part of his property. In this case, Mr. Rochester doesn't buy her. In an ironic twist, I think he's actually paid for having her, but he gets to own her. So much so that he even changes her name without any explanation from Antoinette to Bertha. And also he uproots her from Jamaica and takes her to England without as much as consulting it with her. It is no wonder that Antoinette goes mad, as the novel puts it. Who wouldn't? But now I would love to hear what you have to say about WIDE SARGASSO SEA, so please let me know your thoughts if you have read it. And if you haven't read it yet, let me know what you think of my review. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it with your friends on social media. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Bookish Islander, so we can talk about books on other platforms too. This is all from me. I hope to see you again very soon for another book review or bookish video. Bye for now.